Hello, everyone.
Hey.
How are you?
We're-
Greg, you're not everyone. I'm talking to the
fine,
audience.
Fine.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Lore Foundry, and we're going to talk about wizard infrastructure. Because I have recently been certified as a web developer. Email me if you have job opportunities. And I was like, man, I think it'd be kind of fun if wizard spells, like when you prepare them or whatever, you're like installing your NPM packages or whatever.
Mhm.
And, depending on the spell that you're casting, it's a lot easier to cast it if you just, basically copy someone else's in the vast wizard infrastructure net or whatever. I don't know. We'll talk details about it and hash those out. But it's like, hey, I would like to cast Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion. Well, in the morning, you did your research and you went and got that template all downloaded to your wizard memory, and then you casted it later. But you can't do that you can't cast Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion if you don't do that like pre-work to make sure that it works. And if Mordenkainen decides to cut support, you're gonna have to like figure out your own way to support that. So I thought that was like a really interesting idea, and there's a lot to like riff on there, and I'm really excited to like talk about like the plot possibilities of like, oh, this wizard died and didn't properly
back up
his dependencies or whatever, and so like all of these different magical items or spells like no longer work until someone else can set that up, or all these people just set it up individually. So what do you think, Greg?
So I think the idea is really cool. I really like the concept of of infrastructure for magic,
Right?
and especially infrastructure for magic that's more ethereal. That's not like, oh, it's a summoning circle on the ground. It's like something that exists like outside of reality, maybe. So like talking about like Mordenkainen's mansion, I really like the idea of like there is an actual mansion. There is like a copy that someone had to like make, like, and then that's the thing that everything is referencing. And maybe that's physical, maybe that's more in like a platonic form.
Define, say, platonic or platonic? Platonic, as in like platonic relationship, but this is just a very blank version of
platonic, like a platonic ideal. So
okay,
Plato's got a lot of weird ideas.
Got it.
One of those weird ideas was that there was, let's say you have a chair, right?
Okay.
So there's the chair that's actually like that you actually see, but then there is a truer, more chairier chair that exists in not like real space,
like the idea,
but
of the
idea of the chair that exists in kind of like a realm of like thought or concepts. It's a realm of concepts, and that is like that is like the chair that all other chairs are compared with to determine if it is a chair or not.
Interesting.
But like, and this is for like everything, right? This is what, so that's what like a platonic
kind of like the essential attributes of a chair.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so something like that, something that doesn't exist in reality, but there exists as like a concept that is like put out into space that is then later called upon when you're casting a spell. Yeah. That's something that I really like, that idea. And so it's like a construct that exists in a sense that you can't touch it, but exists, effectively, like air quotes, digitally, right? Yeah. And then you call upon it, and that allows you to complete a spell or do a particular thing. And I think that's pretty cool, because that's sort of like, to me, there's always a sort of like question of like when you're doing something complex or something very specific with a spell, it's like, okay, well, why is it like that, right? Like you're not acting upon like the fundamental forces of reality to create a flaming skull that that shoots around and
Mhm.
like bounces off between people, like that's something kind of specific, right? So
Yeah.
why is it something this specific instead of like you control fire, right, and like conjure
Mhm.
it? You know, why is it some like why with like D&D Vancian magic is it something so specific
Mhm.
instead of being something that's kind of more like a general power, like a kind of like a superhero power
Mhm.
that you might see? And I think that this is a good explanation for that,
Mhm.
where it's, you know, you're calling upon some other body of work that's been made
Yeah.
that has to be extremely specific in order to work at all,
Yeah.
and that this is just the most convenient way to do these particular things.
Yep.
And that's why magic missile looks like magic missile. That's
Yeah.
why you know, like Melf's acid arrow looks like Melf's acid
Yeah. And
arrow.
why it's called MILFs,
Right. It's
right?
because like Melf like literally made it.
Yeah.
And you know, you're, you know, and it's not like he discovered it, he made it.
Yeah.
Um and so that's like a different way to like look and like think about like magic, and it's one that is much more like kind of like industrial. It's, you
Mhm.
know, it's obviously it's based off of like programming ideas.
It's based off of, the idea of like programming and like, I mean, if you get into it, you realize that like you're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And
Mhm.
I'd really want that same feel to be uh like in a wizard class or whatever, especially to make it more distinct from like especially sorcerers, right?
Mhm.
Where sorcerers just have this innate ability to do it. But probably it's more limited in what it can do. But wizards are just like yeah, you go to wizard school to learn all these cool things. Like you're not generally speaking making any new spells.
Mhm.
And if you do, it's going to take a long time and it's going to, be very specific and you're going to have to tinker with a lot of stuff. But you go, you learn about all these people and what they did before, and then you figure out how to use their knowledge like to your own
Mhm.
benefit, right?
And yeah, obviously this is difficult to do in a game like 5th edition D&D, but I do think that like making this like, oh, this is wizard stuff only is something that makes it really like that makes it really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Is instead of being like, oh well, sorcerers and wizards are kind of the same, but the like having it be wizard specific is really fun, but it would
Mm-hmm.
be kind of a lot of work to put into a game. The one thing that I think would be important with this is that if like probably when you're having a lot of these things that wizards call upon be man-made,
Mm-hmm.
kind of takes away some of the mysticism
Yeah.
and the kind of coolness of magic, so you have to put that back in, I
Yeah.
think.
And so I think that like platonic idea of like for Melf's acid arrow, right? Like you have the platonic idea of the arrow existing in the ether somewhere, right? And then when you call Melf's acid arrow, you have to go find that, throw an acid spin on it, and then do all that in 6 seconds as you chuck it at someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like my idea of it. And if somehow the platonic idea of Melf's acid arrow or the arrow part of it like disappears, then either someone else needs to do that or you need to make a local copy of that,
Mm-hmm.
which maybe that'll take like a long rest.
Yeah, so actually I'm spell books are cool.
Yeah.
And I think a spell book would be a great way, like, is like a great place to like put your local copy.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And so like it's really hard, it's a lot of work,
Mhm.
right? And you have to, put all this stuff down, and then you're like, okay, I can do this thing, but I need to cast from my book instead of just like out of air. So like now you're
Mhm.
holding the book, gesturing, like flipping through pages, and then like, that it's something that, you can orchestrate like a more dramatic moment by
Mhm.
making it like you have to do it from the book, right?
Mhm.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
And I think like the preparing spells kind of a thing. It's basically you depending on the spell that you're creating, right? Because a fireball, like, or the lower level spells, yeah, you probably like they're not dependent on anything else, right?
Mhm.
Like a fireball is just a big ball of fire,
Or maybe
or
this is kind of like on the like trying to add some more mysticism into the into magic. Like maybe they're built upon like like forms that are so fundamental and mythological that people don't know who made them. They've always been there,
Right.
and it's something that like, oh yeah, like the gods like put these into the universe to like teach us the fundamentals of magic, or you know, like the god of magic like made these things and gifted them to sentient beings to play with them, right? Or you've got like some, you know, god of magic, or I really like in like Christianity, it's like, yeah, this demon taught mankind how to do magic because like wanted to cause mischief, right? So like, you know, they're like, oh yeah, this particular thing, we think this prince of the hell made it, right? Like, I think that would be super cool.
And I think it would also be kind of fun if, like, you know, fireball or a lot of the elemental spells, like, assuming you're using like planes of the elements, like you pull essence from there and there just exists somewhere in the ether, like a porthole, if you will, where like when you're casting a fireball, you know, you do your little incantation, you do your little hand wavy thing, whatever, and then you kind of like pull essence from like the plane of fire and then shoot it at, like, you form it and you shoot it at someone, and like someone a very long time ago built that or conjured that porthole to allow the fireball spell to work, and then if that goes away, no more fireballs. Or if you are a sufficiently high level wizard, knowing that that's a vulnerability, you make your own.
And I think the like making explicit the infrastructure involved in magic is the cool part of this, and the thing that makes it so you could have a lot more adventures around it in particular. So maybe it's like, you know, okay, you are pulling magic from you are pulling fire from the elemental plane of fire. Okay, well, are you in a place where that connection is quelled or strengthened? Like, that's going to change how, or can you do things to make that more powerful or less powerful? Or, you know, all of the lights in the city are powered by flame from the plane of fire, and it's like, okay, well, if you in a moment quell that and you extinguish all of those for an hour while you do your capers.
Can you imagine like a 9th level spell that was like plane rift, or not rift, but like plane, I don't know, like isolating a plane from like this part of like the thing where like, yeah, you spend, you know, 10 minutes and then you sever all connections that this general area has to the plane of this side or the other thing. And then, yeah, like the plane of fire, poof, all the lights go out everywhere in the city, because you know that the wizard that helped build this city was like, oh yeah, no, we'll just make a portal here, or this kind of like riftway, and then we'll just enchant each of these things to pull just a little bit of fire. Oh man, that'd be dope.
Yeah, and like that's where like the fun of the adventure and the like player agency is gonna come from. And I do, you know, this would be like a lot of work, like creating like these specific things, creating kind of like new magic items and constructs.
I think what you would have to do is you just like, as your wizard or whatever is casting spells, like you think about them as they're casting them. Like, I definitely don't think go through the you know, player's handbook and then say, okay, well, this is where this one comes from, this is where this one comes from.
Yeah,
you just like kind of think of something on the spot, and then you know, you can riff with it later if you want.
Yeah, it would probably be like you skim. This is what I think I would do. Like, so you kind of explain to your player, like, okay, this is how these things work, and your player's like, that's super cool, I'm on board. Hopefully, right? They're like, okay, that's neat. Like, and then you skim through like spell lists, and you kind of go, you see the ones that like are like your basics, like everyone's probably gonna have like magic missile, fireball, or other ones that you find inspiring. You kind of just do like put a couple notes of like, okay, how does this work, what does it do? And so it's like fireball is, you know, like it comes from like energy from the plane of fire made by like and it has been made by this particular person, or maybe it was a demon in order to like cause mischief in the world, like you know, and so maybe when you're doing that, you're kind of adding more flavor. Like, I kind of like the idea of like, to me, like devils making spells for mankind just seems very devilish.
Oh yeah,
it's very
very let's cause some chaos, and the spells that they would have would be very thematic to them too.
And so maybe you've got like a class of spells that like they're not they don't like the actual substance of the spell is not infernal, but its history is, and so there's like people out there that don't like it if you use those spells, right?
It's like cancel culture for wizard spells.
Yeah, or it's like the like the religious order in this area is like, hey, don't cast these spells, like, because they were, although they're useful, like they were deliberately created to disrupt civilized society on like on the mundane plane. Like, don't use them.
And there's probably some religious scribes or whatever, some like religious wizards, I guess, who are actively working to like reverse engineer these spells so they can create them for themselves, and kind of divorce them from the demonic influence that helped birth the spell in the first place.
Or try to take them apart. Like, I definitely think that taking them apart should be very difficult. I think it should be a lot easier for there to be local areas where they don't work, like geographic areas where they don't work, or to have them temporarily not work. But it, like, to do something like just make Fireball not work entirely should be kind of like a big moment in a campaign kind of thing. Like,
no, it'd be crazy. And I think that a lot of these spells, regardless of who made them, like, you can still have the mystery be like, hey, we know how to do this, we don't know why it works, right? Like some really classic, like old-timey medicine stuff where it's like, oh yeah, just chew this aspirin bark and your headache goes away.
And with like, I mean, like, since this is based on programming, like even within programming, it's like, I don't know how this spaghetti code works. I just know the like ins and outs, and it's just a black box within there. And you think you know how it works, but when you try to push things and do things differently, then you get bugs, maybe, right?
There are some like, and there's probably some like wicked smart people who can tell you, but those are going to be very dry and boring conversations unless you're a very inquisitive player.
Yeah, and this is kind of this won't work in 5th edition, but like in 3.5 and 3rd edition, meta magic was something that was available to all classes.
Oh,
and that would be a great explanation of like what you're doing with meta magic is that you are like you figured out like how to push and kind of break the spell in order to make it more powerful. And it's something where like honestly, like if I was trying to put it into 5th edition, what I would do is I would just give the players like magical research would be a downtime activity. And I would also just give players like, this is the, like, you now know the quickened version of this spell, and it's the, you know, it's a higher level spell level. I honestly don't so in 3rd edition, the spell level was higher whenever you tried to do a meta magic thing. And in 5th edition, there's just like meta magic points, right? That you spend.
Yeah, it's a sorcerer thing.
Yeah, so I think what do you do is I would just have like the spell have to be 1 level higher.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then be like, okay, like you know how to cast, like you learned this one meta magic spell. Like it's not like you gained the quickened meta magic ability. You have 1 quickened meta magic spell.
Right. You were able to figure out how you cast a spell, and you're able to do it in a better way. But you know, it takes more juice.
Yep. And that's
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and that's how you make this sort of like hacking and pushing the spells real.
Yeah, and I like, I have one wizard. Courtney, I guess, plays a wizard. Once upon a time, but she also plays a arcane trickster rogue, so there's a little bit more there. In any case, I think that like player spell creation and player spell like tampering and whatever is like criminally underused, and that's something that I really want to be available in my setting. Is like you know the magic missile spell, and that does force damage, but if you spend a decent amount of time, like you can change that to whatever you want.
Yeah,
you just need to do your research, make some checks, and away you go.
And I think one of the ways that, you know, this is a little more like aspirational, but I think one of the ways that you would make it more likely to happen in a campaign is by having much more like having kind of explicit downtime rules, which in my mind, what those
And I
would
think
be
downtime rules are like I want feats too. Like
right.
if I'm telling you I'm going to be sparring with the sword, I want to get expertise in that sword eventually.
And so what it is, it's just like for a certain amount of time, you have so many downtime turns per character, and you just have, if you do this particular thing, you get something back, right? And you just make that explicit, right? Or it's you have the opportunity to make a roll. And so it's like, oh, I want to research at the library about what magical items may be in the area, or I want to train so I can gain expertise or just proficiency in a particular weapon or in a particular kind of armor, or then one of those things would be like, like learn how to do weird things with your spell, right? It would be another one of those.
And like if you find a trainer, like if you find like a fire wizard or whatever, like that guy could probably like he's a really good resource for you. It might cost you something, or you might need to go on a quest for him with him, whatever. But he can help you do that and it'd be a lot freaking easier.
Yeah, and with a lot of these downtime activities, you'd want it to be tied to where the players are right now, where it's like, so it's like you have like a list on your GM screen of like, these are all the things that like people could do. And then you look at that and then you're like, okay, well, where are we? And you're like, oh, we're in a big city. There's a great library here. There, like, oh, there are like, like there are like, air wizardry monks in the mountains that can do things with this. Oh, that's going to be an option. Oh, there's like there's like a mine, or your player characters have a business that they want to run. Like that's kind of
downtime activities are so like valuable, especially for just getting your players to like interact with the setting. They're criminally underused in my opinion. Where it's like, I want to do all these cool fun things aside from just killing things.
And I think I in my opinion, I think the way to do it is to have simple but explicit rules that you don't follow to the letter,
right?
As all rules, but it's something where it's simple, and then you let your players cajole you into exceptions about them, right? So that so your players feel like they can be like, well, wouldn't it make sense that this would make something easier or more difficult, or wouldn't it make sense that like because of this I could now do this? And you're like, oh yeah, of course, that makes total sense. That's super cool, right?
Exactly. And then everyone else sees, well, that guy got something fun, I want to do something fun.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have a party full of people who are invested in the setting, and you're like, hey, I want to find a fencing teacher so I can do this. I can get a fighting style or something like that.
And hopefully you've got, this is something that, we're on a tangent here, this is something that in most RPGs that I've seen, they talk about like, oh, like training or leveling up or gaining a skill takes time, but then the rules aren't robust enough to actually like enforce that. So it's something where, like they'll just say like, oh, it takes so, like in Shadowrun, it's like it takes so many weeks to gain a particular skill, like up a certain thing. And then it's like, okay, well, what else in the game is referencing weeks? Right. And so you're like, oh, well, nothing is. So then you just kind of forget about it. But then if you have a lot of things, if you have the game reference downtime turns, and you should deliberately have the length of a downtime turn be kind of vague, because that just kind of gives you more freedom as a GM, because you, in my opinion, you don't want to be like checking your watch and thinking like, okay, well, how many seasons are they going to be here doing this sort of stuff? So that means they technically should have 6 downtime turns, but if they have that many, then they're going to be able to do this bullshit that I don't want them to. It should just be like, you can just say a number is really the point.
It'll probably take you 6 weeks to learn this new trick.
Right. And so it's something where like, how long is a downtime term? Like, oh, it's about a season.
Right.
Or something like that. It's about a season, and it depends on like how much time you actually are able to devote to it, because like maybe you're really busy with your other duties, and that means you're only going to get, half as many as I would normally give you, or something like that. Because then it's wishy-washy enough for you to be able to dictate to your players how many turns they're getting, and them to be okay with just being like, oh yeah, that's what it is, instead of them being like, excuse me, but 1 month is supposed to be this many, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's, you kind of want to avoid that.
Yeah. And I think like oh fuck, where was I gonna go with that one? I mean, any reasonable player like is not going to like rules lawyer you about like, oh well, it's been 13 days since this has happened. How many more days do I have? It's like you'll get it when I tell you get it. All right. It's not being an asshat.
But then on the other hand, having a season is specific enough so when you do have downtime, you're not kind of making a total guess.
Right.
So that's why I think it should be something like that, or so many in a season.
And that's another thing too, like especially with like the downtime or just stuff in general, especially when it comes to like leveling up. I think it'd be really cool if you kind of got drip fed your next level's class abilities, and you're able to like role play that while you're in combat, right? Where it's like, hey, I know I'm getting an extra attack, I'm gonna try sneaking one in occasionally, or hey, I'm gonna get a new fun fighting style or maneuver or something. I should be practicing that either in combat or during downtime. I think instead of just going to bed, waking up, and bing,
now you have
I can do all this fun stuff.
Yeah. And so if you bring like a time mechanic or like a downtime turn into multiple different parts of the game, where it's like, oh, leveling up involves downtime, trying to muster an army takes so much downtime, trying to make a particular magic item or potion is so long in downtime, trying to cast a particular kind of spell is a downtime turn, like a pretty crazy spell. Then it kind of gets into the player's heads, like, and the GM's head, that okay, this is an actual like supported game mechanic or that I can use. Healing would be measured in downtime turns, like things like that. So that's kind of how I think you would actually make it a part of the game that is used.
Yeah.
And now, not every game you'd want this, like a big damn quest game where you're like speeding on rails towards the big bad evil guy, then you kind of want to disregard it.
Yeah, Frodo and Sam are not worried about leveling up their fighting. They're trying to yeet themselves to Mordor.
Yep, and that's something where you tailor the rules of the game to your campaign. That's just how it is, and you always do that whenever you're doing like house rules or giving a player something special or making your own adventure, but now you're just doing it on like a more fundamental mechanic of the game, right? Like if you're not going to be able to, if the whole campaign takes place over a season, then make your downtime turns days.
Yeah. And depending on kind of how you want your players to feel, like, or their characters to feel as a member or like just a person in the setting, like there's trope precedent set where like the POV character is special and they can learn things quickly, right? Because like that the Avatar from Avatar: The Last Airbender like can learn each of these elements super duper quick, right? Because that's who they are. Or like in Skyrim, you're the Dragonborn, you can learn these shouts in literal minutes when it took the NPCs like decades to learn. And so that's another thing you can do where, hey, a normal person, this would take, 3 months to learn this maneuver. You are special. Yeah, you can learn it in a couple weeks with good training.
Yeah, you're special. You're the heroes of this story. So like, yeah, things are gonna go a little bit faster. And like, I think most people are kind of okay with that.
Yeah. And is the fighter going to be able to learn a spell in no time at all? No, that's out of your wheelhouse, dude. But for the things that you're good at, I think it's good, and it makes the players feel good to know that they are, like, their character is special even within their own kind of archetype of a character. It'd feel really bad for you to learn things at the same pace as like a palace guard or something like that.
Right. And the only like a big bad evil guy or a rival should be competing with you.
Yeah, exactly. I also think that the touching back to the whole wizards thing, like competing wizards like Nikola Tesla and Alexander Graham Bell. No, wrong guy.
No, that's telephones.
No, shit.
Franklin.
Tesla and what?
Is it?
No, it's not Franklin.
No, I'm not.
God damn it!
Wow, now we both look like idiots.
Cut this part, please.
Please cut this.
Greg says to himself in the future. Tesla versus Edison.
Thomas
God
Edison.
damn it! I'm dumb.
We're both dumb.
But yeah, like two people just like, especially, early, you can make this history, or you could
there's two or there's two people pioneering something.
Pioneering, some new form of magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
you've got the campaign going on in one place.
Imagine, like, you walk into a big town and there's like disciples of this wizard be like, hey, this is how you should cast spells.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should follow my dude's book of teaching, or like this is the magical infrastructure that you should use.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else, like, there's just like wizard gang fights.
Well, you go to like the wizard pub, right, which is like actually like the coffee house or whatever,
right?
And they're like on separate sides of the room because like the coffee house owner is like, you guys can't interact with each other, or you're gonna start fights, and I can't have that. And that would be something pretty funny, and like your wizard and your party kind of shows up all innocent, like, oh, I'm just gonna go hang out with some colleagues, right, some people that are like-minded, and then you end up in the middle of
I can imagine like the spell components versus like spell focus debate would be like at least part of that. But I also think, now that I mentioned spell components, like spell components are like a really cool way to to kind of flavor your spells too, because have fleece for minor illusion because you're pulling the fleece over someone's eyes. And like if you're playing a wizard and you feel particularly inclined to like create a spell, it may be pertinent to team up with the ranger and try to get like a dragon's tongue or something like that.
Yeah, like something special. Yeah.
Like, I think that's another really cool way. And then maybe later, like, you use a spell component for a while until you figure out a way to replicate the spell component using a spell focus. And that could be like another additional thing. And the wizard, if they feel particularly business inclined, could, develop that and then, sell it to people, like teach them how to do this spell for money.
Yeah, or like a way that you can give a way you can give your player character something special, but then but like limit, like kind of, it's not just like giving them another spell. It's like, maybe there's a 4th level spell that like would really solve a lot of problems for them, but they can't cast 4th level spells. Like, well, if you spend the time training it, so you have that spell in your spell book or whatever, you somehow get that, and then you also have some magical component that like makes it easier for you to do it. Then you can actually prepare this spell, but the limiting factor is how many
consumed.
Is how many of these magical components you have, and so that means you can have your wizard like agonizing over like, do I cast it now or later, like, is it going to save me now or later, so that's something that you can have it, you can give them a precious resource that makes sense in setting and is like fun. It's like a gift for that particular like for that particular character, but it isn't overpowering because it's something that can be used up over so many times, and so you can basically determine how much of this you want to give that character, and as they level up, then it kind of would no longer be as useful.
What I just thought of?
What?
This is going back to the platonic idea. What if you use a like spell components for the most part until you are able to create a platonic idea of that item that you would use is created in the ether somewhere, and then you just draw on that platonic idea, and then that's what you use with the spell focus. Boom.
Yeah. So
man.
So in this is something I knew I was going to talk about.
Okay.
Just hadn't gotten to it yet. Is within Earth Dawn, which I've talked about a whole bunch of times, there is something called spell matrices. So, like, in Earth Dawn, you have the physical world, and then you've got the astral world.
Okay.
And a spell matrix is something that is like a construct you make in the astral realm that helps you cast spells.
Right.
So it's basically like a magical box that like you
it's your spell memory palace.
Yeah, that like protects you from the dangers of the the bad energies and terrible magic like that exist in the astral realm, but then also that lets you cast spells faster because you basically like put part of a spell in it. And I really like, and these are also things that like you can look in the astral, which is dangerous. You don't always want to do, but you can look in the astral and then you can see that they have a spell matrix. Like it's a thing that's with them. And I think that's a really cool idea. And I like that idea that like you have little, like you have things that you've made and maybe they exist kind of in another reality, but close to you, or maybe they exist in like a platonic thing out, somewhere else. But I do really like the idea of it's like you made a particular thing and like that now lets you do all these other things. Because like playing a non-spellcaster in an Earth Dawn campaign, hearing all of the players talk about like spell matrices and things like that, like actually really puts me into character because it's like, what the fuck are they talking about? I don't understand this at all. And like, that's how it should be. Like, I'm not, it's, so I think that would be pretty cool where it's like, you can, you make like, you make, like you make the form of the spell component, and then now you can use your staff, which you always have on you, and then maybe you've got like some terrible evil wizard that like can unmake those things as a way to like fuck with your players.
Can you imagine if like you either like lose your spell matrix or you like stumble upon someone else's like disconnected spell matrix, and then all of a sudden like, or maybe it's I think it would be connected to like a person's spell book or spell book like adjacent to object where it's like, hey, it's tied to this thing, or you could tie it to yourself, whatever. And so if you come across someone's spell book, like especially an old wizard spell book, like that's a treasure because you also like you can transfer all that stuff to your own spell book, and then you don't need to go through all that effort of like learning how to make the platonic ideas of I don't know, like a crow's feet or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is like, I always kind of visualize these things as like made of like geometric forms made of like silver thread, like in like floating around you. And I always think like I've always had like that fundamental image, and then like you find like a really old one, and they use different techniques and different designs, right? And like given the resources and materials they had back then, that's what they could make, and like they don't make them like they used to, kind of thing. And now I have like, I think that'd be pretty cool. I really like the idea of like someone who can see into a different reality being able to like dress down like another like spellcaster, and like learn a lot about each other. And
you can like that person, I don't know, like the gift of wizard sight or something, I don't know, like looks at you for an amount of time, like maybe tilts their head a little bit, and then knows every single spell that you can cast and every single spell that like you have currently prepared.
I like,
it's like they don't know everything that's in your spell book, but they know enough about your spell book just via your spell matrix that they know how to beat you.
It's like two fighters like sizing each other up, right? It's like, you can see kind of how big they are, like how they move, like what school of fighting are they from by how they move, and but it's like the same shit for wizard version. With like wizard sight, I always really like your eyes roll back in your head being like the giveaway for it, because it's like something that people don't really do. Like it's
someone could probably be really subtle about it, but if you know what you're looking for.
Right. So you just kind of like look across the room, and then you just see someone's eyes, like their eyes kind of drop back down, and you're like, that guy, he just, That would be pretty cool.
I'm really excited for this. I'm also trying to think now, like with the other spellcasting classes, like clerics, especially bards are in, I think, a funny spot where sorcerers, they just have this innate connection to magic, whatever they can do, whatever they want for the most part.
Clerics are probably calling upon like a library made by their god.
Yeah, and so they would just say they're like the cloud computing version of spellcast. You're like, hey man, bam,
yeah.
Like just brings down a smite from like the holy cloud or whatever.
Like you see really them funny. Astrally, and you don't see spell matrices. You just see like a great connection going up into the heavens.
I also like the ideas of like clerics just being able to cast spells because they're very fervent about what they believe in. So I don't know exactly how that would work, but another time. But yeah, and like bards, there's a new like College of Creation bard, which is basically just like you're a Tolkien bard, where it's like, yeah, you play the strings and then the literal motes of creation are created, or like your bardic inspiration or whatever. And so I'm trying to think of how they'd be able to customize spells.
Bards have always kind of been like in this weird like middle place.
Yeah, they're kind of in between sorcerers and wizards. I feel like they'd be able to, but like they'd have to. I almost want to keep the spell customization to be like wizard focused only, but maybe a bard could get in on it if they could like partner with a wizard, be like, hey, how do you think I would do this?
But like in actual play, it's really just, do you have a bard or do you have a wizard? Okay, now you have to make that decision and figure it out and find what's fun.
Yeah, I think I would make them make a check for it, but like what they could do would be more limited or just like different and more flavorful. Because I think a big part of like making sure that a class or a character feels good to play is just like how much of their fluff is translated to game mechanics.
Yeah, how much of it feels real.
Yeah. It's like and that's I think when you have lots of classes that can do the same thing, like the fighting styles thing is really cool. But you get it maybe you can get a fighting style as many different things. Like rangers have it, fighters have it, maybe barbarians have it, I forget. And just like giving it away makes everyone else who has it feel a little bit less special.
Like unless it's like a really like you get trained from a master, or unless it's like something like special kind of quest reward.
Yeah.
But if you don't have anyone in your party that has those fighting styles, and then you give it to one player, then it's not a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and actually I was gonna play a bard, probably College of Swords back, and it never materialized, but many years ago, and I was trying to think of like, yeah, he's gonna be like a fencing master, and then I watched The Princess Bride, and then the Dread Pirate Roberts, aka Wesley, is fighting Inigo Montoya, and they're like, I see you are using Capaferro. Like, well, I thought it was fitting, considering the terrain. He's like, well, I have always thought that Tybalt cancels Capaferro. Like, I would think so too, which is why I'm using blank. And I think that kind of a thing too. Like, there's so many ways that you can tweak how people are fighting. And like, if a player is into that kind of thing, you'd be like, yeah, you notice that he's using this style of fighting, and if you use this one, you can counter him.
Yeah, so...
But the other guy sized you up knowing that you would switch, so he was countering the counter. He was like feinting, style A, so you would use style B, and he's going to counter style B with style C.
This isn't exact, like, directly related to what you were just talking about, but I think with giving players like more fighting styles, I know they're kind of already set up where they're kind of mutually exclusive, but maybe just like having it be like explicit where it's like you can only use one at a time. When you choose a particular set of weapons, that's when you choose which one you're going to be using with that. So then you can make it, you don't have to worry about them like stacking it, but you can let players, because something that I definitely doesn't feel good is like, oh, I'm going to be a fighter and I'm choosing that I'm going to be a fighter using this kind of thing, and I'm always going to be a two-handed fighter dude, right? And that's not, like, I really have always wanted to play the, like, fight dude that knows how to do anything, right? And so I've always wanted to be someone that's, like, kind of like a bit like Jackie Chan, where you're just like
Mhm.
picking up a thing and now we're
Dude,
using this,
yeah,
right?
like kind of the bar tavern brawler
Mhm.
archetype,
So
but like a better version, because the 5th edition is just like it does a d6.
But not even with like explicitly improvised weapons, but it's just like, you're playing an urban campaign and you're often disarmed and stuff like that, and then you just show up in a situation and you're like, oh, I'm taking this guy's stuff, right? Or it's like, oh, I grab the like ornamental quarterstaff off the wall, and now I'm fighting this until I can get like that person's sword and shield, and now I'm fighting sword and shield. And like, to me, that sounds super cool and really fun, and is a way to like make melee combat be more interesting than like I swing with my sword, where it's like I'm trying to get different weapons.
Like the disarming, like I think the disarming strike and things like that are just super underrated, or things that can disarm opponents. And wow, we're on a tangent. Because like, yeah, you take the giant's sword away, like, one, good luck, but you do that somehow, he does so much less damage. And like all those archers, if you can somehow like nullify their bows, or like the person who someone else is fighting, you're able to take their weapons away, and then all of a sudden all they have is their fists. Like, they're probably gonna scoot.
Or it's like you're fighting a giant with a sword and you're like, my only chance is to disarm him, and then it's an equal playing field.
Yeah. Can you imagine like your barbarian, or he's like, I could take him with my fists, but only if he also only has his fists. That'd be a lot of fun.
And so then now you're wrestling.
Yeah, and then you're wrestling a freaking giant. Like, yeah, and then the tales that are told be like, yeah, one time Jerry's character like disarmed a giant and then put him in an arm bar and got him to tap out, and then he broke his arm off and beat him to death with it.
And that's like way cooler than like I used cleave and did extra damage and then took him down, or like, oh, I rolled a critical and then he died. It's it's you've got a little more like, yeah, in how you put that into rules. I don't know, because I definitely you're playing a fighter, and it's kind of like I have to play a battle master because I want to be able to do cool things. Yeah. And if I'm not playing a battle master, then I don't get to do cool things. It's kind of like how it feels a lot of times. So I don't think the like, I know this isn't a new idea, but a lot of people, and I agree, kind of say like the battle master should go away and just everyone should be able to do things like that in some sense.
Like, battle master is just the coolest class in general. One like fantasy character that I like think of occasionally is like, right now I've got a character that I haven't played in a long time. His name is Mako. He's a dragonborn paladin. No, he's a barbarian. He's a zealot barbarian. And he basically just has a Captain America shield. It's a shield of returning. He just throws it all the goddamn time. And something that I think was really fun is like, what if he just goes up to someone, bashes, their head in, knocks them, not unconscious, but like knocks them dizzy, takes their sword, kills him with it, hucks the sword at their buddy, like just real like movie shit, right? And like, even if it misses, like this guy doesn't have a sword anymore, and the other guy like maybe got hurt, right? And then next thing you do, you just run over to the other guy, kill him, take his sword, throw it at someone else. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's something where in a lot of games, like, you'll have a disarming mechanic, and then it's like, okay, they pick up their thing off the ground. Like, you kind of always have to do a little bit more than just...
You have to, like, kick it away.
Yeah, kick it away, yeah. And I think part of the solution to that is just, like, making, like, some very, like you as a GM, like, kind of embellishing it a little bit more. Like, yeah, you disarm them, but now they have to do more than just pick up their item. Yeah. So, instead of feeling like they're like, oh, I just go and pick it up, then they're like, they draw their secondary, or they have to scramble and run over, and they don't fight a turn because they're running and grabbing their weapon. Yeah. Yep.
It's like, in having to, like, bend down and grab your weapon in, like, a melee combat,
like
that should be, like, an opportunity attack, for sure.
Yes.
Or they grab it in such a way that they have to forego their attack, right? Because that puts you at such a disadvantage, unless maybe they have a shield or something. But yeah, like,
or you got buddies to like cover for you.
Yeah, like, it's so not marginal, but it's so like not important for someone to have to like grab their weapon up off the ground the way that 5th edition is like written. That I think. Yeah, the whole disarming part of the combat. Like, if you disarm someone, they're basically dead, right? Because you have the sword, they don't, or whatever.
That's how it should be. Like, unless they've got people to like defend them and back them up right away and get you off of them, like it should be like your first instinct is like they need to retreat, and if they or go for like a sidearm, and if they but yeah, like trying to like it should be at least like some kind of like acrobatics or athletics check to like grab your weapon off the ground without provoking attack or opportunity,
like a contested check or something, and the person can
it's like you knock their spear out of the hand and then you put your foot on the spear and then they're like trying to grab it, and then now it's a fight between can they like pick the spear off the ground and like trip you, or can you just like hold them down and then stab the shit out of them.
And it's like I just think narratively combat isn't very interesting, like the way that it is described, I guess, and especially like new players don't, or some new players are like, yo, I want to do this crazy thing, and you're like, fucking go for it, dude. And then other new players or other players who've just played a lot in general or maybe a little bit checked out, like don't add that flair in, where it's like, no, if I'm beating you to death, I'm going to describe how I do it, and I'm going to try to like tell the DM or GM like what I'm attempting to solve by doing that, which is I think another reason why the Star Wars RPG system is really neat, because like you can hit and do cool stuff, or you can not hit and do cool stuff, or you can I don't know, hit and screw yourself over. Like the combat in Star Wars RPG is much more narrative and interesting, I think.
Yeah, it can be, and sometimes unfortunately it does kind of like, especially if you're kind of going quick, it kind of fall back to mechanics where you're just kind of like, I got advantage. Okay, well you get blue dice. Okay, there you go. And like you should be like explaining how, but sometimes it's kind of like it feels like it's kind of too much. Like,
yeah, it's like every time that we get in a ship fight, it's like, okay, I'm handing blue dice off to you. All right, I'm handing blue dice off to you. It's like, okay, yeah, but where's the juice?
Yeah,
where's the fluff? I need it. Well, whew, that's a tangent.
Yep.
So I guess like the subtitle for this episode is like, and how to make other things more interesting too.
I think so.
Because the wizard thing, I think the like the spell matrices and this like platonic idea of like items coming, or like, and then you use that and via your spell focus, and then your spell components are probably what you use until you learn how to do it without the spell focus, I guess. And if someone pulls support for their copy of the platonic idea of an item, then everybody else's magic swords or whatever stop working.
Yeah, this is right. And like the example that we talked about before we recorded this was the mansion, and it's like, oh well, okay, like the mansion's gone, well someone makes like a kind of shitty cottage instead, and that's the holdover.
Yep. And unless you'd have to like go to a mansion somewhere and do wizard stuff, like look at it and like really squint for a really long time, and then like, I don't know, draw some stuff up in your spell book in order to create that platonic idea of a mansion and be able to put that in your spell matrix during your long rest, right? And then it's there available for when you want to use it, or when you do your ritual spell, you flip to the page and do other stuff.
Or you're in adventures and you find like, this is a font of water. Okay, this is what I'm going to use as a source for all my like water-based spells, right?
And then you've got like the tinfoil hat wizards who are like, I don't use anything that I don't.
Yeah, I don't do. Yeah.
Like I'm like, my spells are not dependent on anyone. I have created my own porthole.
It's like I only use.
Yeah, like
open and free magic.
Yeah, open and free magic, and then I fork that repository so I have it on my own in my own spell book. I don't depend on anything unless it is in my spell book. And I want to make sure that I know what it is before it goes in there.
Everybody just thinks those guys are wacko until the end times come, and they're the only ones with magic left.
Yep. Yeah, I think. At the end of the day, this idea just adds a lot of flavor to wizards where some may have been lacking. But like, I mean, wizard institutions are kind of a staple trope.
Yeah,
so.
And I think that exactly. And I think that this fits really well with fancy and magic. Like it kind of like ups
And
it ups
define
the weird.
Vancian magic. I mean,
Oh,
it's from like what, Jack Vance?
Yeah,
Or,
Vancian magic is where you've got it's you have spells that like you memorize, but when you cast them, they're gone, and they're like very specific
Mhm.
spells. So it's like how
It's like the
how
D&D
wizards work
version of
in.
wizardry.
Yeah. And this is like how wizards work. Like basically until third edition, this was how all magic was in
Mhm.
D&D, where it would be you have a number of like spell slots,
Yeah.
and then you fill them with like it's this particular spell. And so you may take a spell multiple times because you need to fill like you might want to cast it multiple times, and it's very specific, and when you cast it, it's gone, and you're reading it from a spell book. And like in Jack Vance, it's kind of implied there's sort of like mind demons that like you like enslave in like a prison in your mind that like you let go and then cast the spell. Is weird. And this is like another interpretation of that, which honestly I kind of like, because it's a little too weird for me.
Yeah.
Where it's and this is something where it's like humanity created the infrastructure to make magic, and like that's what's impressive and crazy, and is the reason why things are different nowadays than they were in the past, is because that infrastructure is there or not. Like I think that's a really good reason why don't like you find the spells of the past, but you can't use them until you have to build some other thing, which maybe is only for your personal use. And that's like a way that you can like keep the power level checked of your setting. I think that would be pretty cool.
And that's another way too that you could, be like, hey, in order to complete this part of the quest, you have to go cast this spell. Here's where you can get the spell, but like the support for the spell isn't there, so you got to go on this other quest to dig into the lore or whatever. And like, yeah, you got to go make a porthole to
and it's like
the plane of ice.
You have the ability with this like small wizard college that is allied with you to create this temporary infrastructure to cast the spell once, and then you'll be able to get it off. And like, that to me, that's way cooler than like, oh, you need 8 wizards to complete the summoning ritual to summon the demon, because you just need to have 8. Instead it's like, this is like a complicated task, and everyone's like crafting a thing. It's obviously you can bring that specificity into like your other kind of magic that already exists, but like, it's fun. You've got like a reason. It's got explained, and it's like, this is something that people literally have to build. And
and then if they really wanted to do that real big crazy spell like multiple times, they'd have to partner with someone to like create the magical infrastructure for it permanently, which allows other people, at least those who you involve in the process, the ability to cast that spell as well, which might not be in your best interest.
Right. It's something where most likely, except we'd have to figure out the specifics of it, but except for things that are probably like very personal and like small, anything that you would make has the chance of falling into everybody's hands.
Yeah.
And that's like the dangerous part. Like, I think that would be super cool.
I also think that like there's probably some wizards who like get their kicks or like learn their spells, or are like kind of spell archaeologists who will go to like old, rundown colleges or something, sift through books, or be like a planeswalker type and like look through the plane of thought or the astral plane or whatever for like abandoned matrices or these like abandoned infrastructures on how to cast these spells, and try to reverse engineer the spells. Where it's like, I found this like the Antikythera machine, or I don't think it was this big series of gears in a machine that calculated the position of like planets, I think, or eclipses or something, and it is really cool. But basically, they would just go to the astral plane and find one of those, and then figure out what it does, and then fix it.
And like, these people are kind of nuts. Because they're spending most of their time like not in real space.
They're just like wizard astral projecting, like trying to find all these like cool crazy things, and maybe like some part of your quest like makes you go there, like you and your pals. Then you're having to fend off the evils or the hazards of
the shadow people,
the shadow people, or like literal just like astral winds or something. I don't or the like party, it has to protect the wizard while he does that, because once you do that, then all of a sudden like you're lit up like a beacon to people
calling
who
out into the ether and things respond in the physical. And so it's like you're like, hey, let's like we're in a wizard tower and now you gotta like keep all the gargoyles that are flocking to it off from like breaking in. And
you've got like mind flayers who will be like, oh, yo, this guy's got some juice.
Just like get,
or like evil wizards,
like get Yankee drop ships just coming out of the astral plane, just like showing up and be like, "What's this guy doing?" And you're like,
yeah, I think it at least gives people an opportunity to write more interesting and different quests rather than slay the dragon. Yeah, or like here's what you have to do while you're slaying the dragon. Yeah. In any case, I don't have anything else left. At least
I don't
currently.
either. No.
Thanks for bearing with us through all of our tangents. We appreciate it. This has been the Lore Foundry. Yay!
Yay!
We recorded another episode.
We did it.
I remember I was listening to Stuff You Should Know, and someone wrote in, and they're like, "Hey, what are the biggest pieces of advice that you can give to podcasters, like new ones?" And they're like, "Okay, well, just do something that you like to do, and release regularly." Like, ooh, 50%, baby.
Yeah.
So I hope that your notification that there was a new podcast episode found you well, and I hope you're excited. But we'll try to release 2 episodes a month, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But we'll do our best.
And maybe we'll be having some lifestyle changes that might give us more time. Perhaps. You will find out as we find out. All right. Thank you for listening.
Bye. Oh, send us an email.
Send us emails. Yeah, when you're playing anonymously, what happens is you'll end up with like one other person. You'll be like, "So who do you think is Germany? So who do you think is France?" Right? And you'll just do that thing. Like
I remember I was talking to Ian, and when you guys were playing anonymously. And he like fooled you into thinking he was someone else.
Yep.
And like every time you'd come around to like talk, you'd be like, "Oh, I gotta go do this thing." It's like, no, we're not talking diplomacy right now because I can't lie for that long.